All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the live stream. Yes, we've made it 4 episodes. Tonight, I got a special guest, Kendall Aldridge, currently coaching at Houghton College in New York. So, again, has had a really, really cool coaching pedigree in terms of where he's gone, what he's been able to do. He actually started as a JV assistant at Decatur Central High School. For those of you who don't know, former high school teammate of mine, and now I'm super happy to see him at the college level. So how you doing, Kendall? How's it going?
Things are going good, man. Just quarantining out here in a little Houghton, New York, middle of nowhere. So we're pretty safe out here. But things going well.
Yeah, how have you been impacted? I mean, I know New York City's pretty bad. So how's it been in Houghton?
Yeah, not nearly as bad around here. With obviously the population isn't as large. So we're pretty solid around here. We're just now getting into phase one of things. So we should be good. We're starting to get some positive warriors back from school. We should be getting back to school in August.
Now, has
So
that
things
affected your guys' summer workouts and that kind of thing? Are you guys going to be able to get your team together, do anything that way?
Yeah, so with D3, we're not allowed to. Coaches aren't allowed to be in the gym when guys do that. It's all player led. So obviously, it's affected those guys getting in the gym together. But hopefully, they've been able to do some things on their own or at home. Some guys are
Yeah.
doing some work in the basement, things like that. I'm sure it's similar to you and the high school level.
All right. Just making sure everybody can hear you. We've had audio issues the last couple times, making sure everybody can hear you.
And I'm not here
Um,
to say
all right, let's talk a little bit about our background. We grew up playing at Franklin Central. We played for Mark James. Now you tweeted something. You kind of came at me earlier today, and so I'm interested to hear this take. You said I was a bad teammate in high school. So I'd
yeah.
love to hear this story, this reasoning. Why was I a bad teammate?
No, so I called you last week, and we had a little discussion on you were just. I think your mindset and focus was just so much different than the average high school basketball player. So you were a great player. You had great focus, and you were actually a good teammate in the sense that you tried to pull others along, and show them the way. But I had some of my own experiences with you. I remember one time and JV. I was on the JV team. You guys. It was my junior year. We were pretty good that year. Um, but we were mixing up teams, and we were going 5-on-0 secondary break, and I messed up a secondary play. I think it was like I even remember the play as secondary pick, right? But I threw it up. I kicked it ahead to the 2-man, and you're like, if you don't know the effing plays, get the F off the court.
That sounds
you
like
know?
me.
So,
That sounds like me.
yeah, yeah. But your focus was just so much different. It wasn't that you were a bad teammate. You always knew we were in the gym for a purpose, or even the weight room and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wasn't the nicest teammate, when it came to certain things. I was on guys. I still am today when it comes to, knowing plays and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff and zero tolerance. I
yeah.
I can remember one time Casey Coons and I had a funny little run in because we were going through plays or something, and he was just goofing off. Him and Joe Tallhelm were just like messing around. They were just goofing off, and
Yep.
so Casey kind of cut, and I was guarding him. And I remember I just checked him in the neck, like really.
Sophomore Casey Coon.
And I was like, "You better wake up! Like we're trying to win games here." And he
Right, right.
he he said something like, "You ever do that again?" It was one of those, on the court, it was intense, but once we got in the locker room, we were all buddies and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, man. It was now looking back on it as a coach now, you need players like that because as a coach, that's really the mindset of a coach. You want to be serious once you're in between those lines and in the weight room. I can still remember you getting guys together in the weight room, even Jawan. Like, hey man, we're here to work. Like, come on,
yeah,
Jawan, get over here. We're maxing out. So yeah, you need those guys, man.
yeah, it's interesting to see that, like, as a coach now. We were both able to play for Mark James, and I was talking to my wife about this story the other day about, he used to come in and just really mentally test us,
Hmm.
and he would make practices super super hard, and I think he would do things on purpose just to make us mad. And I can remember, I want to say it was my junior year. he created this drill that I swear was impossible to win. It was just set up to be impossible. And um, it was something like JV. If the JV scored, they got 5 or 6 points, and then if the varsity scored, we got 1 point. So we had to score 5 more points, 5 more baskets just to get the same amount if they score one. So I was like already livid.
Right.
And we start the scrimmage, we score 2 or 3 baskets and get up 3-0, and then JV scores and they get 6 points. So it's 6-3. And he's screaming at us, and he's telling us we're all worthless, and we can't beat the JV. So we end up losing the scrimmage, and he's still jawing at us. And I
Right.
remember I went over to the water station, and we had water bottles, and I was probably being over dramatic, which I have a tendency to do, but I grabbed the water bottle and I threw it. Now I didn't expect it to do what it did, but it exploded against the wall, and it hit one of those mops, and the mop like flew, and it made all this noise, made the loudest commotion. So obviously all the coaches saw it. And
Right.
so Coach James goes, Ashworth on the line. He starts making me run. And we redo the drill, and lo and behold, the varsity all of a sudden starts killing the JV, doesn't let them score, and they end up beating them. And I'm still running on the line, and Coach James looks over at me. He goes, "See, Ashworth, we don't even need you." And he's just, and I just remember, because, anybody who's played for Coach James knows when you leave, you have to shake the coach's hands before you go out the office, or leave for the day. And I was trying so hard not to go through that office. I was trying to sneak out, and he probably knew I was trying to sneak out. So he kind of caught me and was like, "You need to come back into the office. We got to talk." And,
Right.
we figured it out. But I just remember that being one of those practice days where, oh my gosh, I just knew he had it in for us.
Yeah. I think there's always a method behind the madness with him, um, with a lot of other things like that we went through. And as I grew older, I didn't really necessarily like him when I played for him, but as I grew older, I definitely grew to understand what he was doing with all the lessons he was trying to teach us for
For
sure.
sure. For sure. All right, let's talk a little bit about you. You started at the high school level as a coach
Mm.
in Indiana. You ended up being a trader and moving out to Arizona. So what was coaching in Arizona like compared to coaching in Indiana? Because I'm biased, but I think Indiana high school basketball is the best basketball, high school basketball in the nation.
Right.
So what was it? Was your experience there? And then we'll talk a little bit about you jump into the college ranks.
Yeah. The biggest difference I thought was just the atmosphere. So it's exactly kind of what you're saying. Like they always say, like in 49 other states, it's basketball, right? But I got there and I would go to our games, and it was kind of like it was like some of the crowds. It was like a freshman crowd, There,
Oh yeah.
there's just 100 people in the whole entire gym. So that was the biggest difference going from our varsity games in Indiana, and playing at Southport and for county and things like that. I never really saw crowds like that until maybe the state tournament game that I went to. There was a decent crowd. It was at Arizona State. But yeah, the biggest difference was the atmosphere, man. It's a lot different.
Yeah, it's interesting state by state how people can't really comprehend what it's like in Indiana. We
Yeah.
have, I think, eight out of the 10 biggest high
Mhm.
school stadiums in the
Right.
nation, and people just can't comprehend that 8,000 people will go watch a high school basketball game. Not even
Right.
a state championship game. I mean, it might be a regional game or a.
2 nights in a row too.
What'd you say?
It could be 2 nights in a row too.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, I mean, I can remember at the heyday of like Romeo Langford when I was at Franklin Central as an assistant. When we went down there, I mean, those crowds were crazy. I mean,
Right.
down in Seymour, there'd be 8,000 people stacked on top of each other. So, be interesting to see, how that plays out and whether we'll see crowds like that again. With all the Corona stuff. I hope it gets back to normal, but we'll see.
Yeah, even getting back in the gym will be a little different, just as far as the contact with basketball is so different.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, so you go to Arizona for what, 2 years? Was it 2 or 3 years?
3 years.
3 years, and then you made the jump this year to the D3 level. So you go to coach college, and kind of a big jump. You go from Arizona to a small town in New York. So
Yeah.
what was that like for you? What was that transition, and what kind of made you want to get to the college level?
Well, I think a few years ago, like right after I got done at Decatur, I kind of fell in love with coaching. So I knew after that I wanted to kind of do this full time. So the best way to do that is just move up to the college level. So that was the major part. But the transition, man, it was actually smooth. Like, I mean, it's a lot different going from Phoenix, one of the nicest cities in the
Yeah.
world. I mean, it's a small town, man, and it's in Allegheny County, which is the poorest county in New York. Um, they're great about supporting what we do here at Houghton, but obviously going from Phoenix to one of the poorest counties in New York is a little different. The
Weather's a little
climate,
different. Yeah.
yeah, the climate's different, man. But I can't complain. I mean, we're living pretty good over here. So
Yeah. Let's go back, kind of talk about what made you get into coaching. I think coaching is kind of one of the last jobs. It's like very selfless, like
yeah,
especially at the D3 level or the high school level. You're obviously not getting paid a ton of money.
mhm.
You're doing it because you love basketball, and you know there's certain things that you love about it. So what made you want to get into coaching?
Yeah. Well, I knew I won't. After I left, I got done playing. I knew that I wanted to teach. And I kind of thought back to like people that I admired growing up, and one of those people was Coach James. And I remember I actually called him like once I got done playing. Um, but I just admired how looking back on my life, like outside of my parents and my immediate family, when you think about the adults that affected your life, he was one of the ones for me and some of the other coaches in my life. So I knew I wanted to do that. Didn't have any idea what the hell I was doing, and I mean, quite frankly, I still don't. But I just kind of knew that I wanted to be that guy for other kids down the line.
Yeah, no, that's great reasoning, and I think I was in the same boat when I first got into it. I didn't even really think I was going to get into coaching. I was kind of
Yeah.
working in the medical field, and I was thinking I was going to be a doctor, or something in the medical field. And I did that for a few months, and I hated it. And I was like,
Mhm.
this is not for me. And I remember I just volunteered. I was a volunteer coach my first year. Like, I was just the guy. I didn't get paid. I was
Yeah.
just helping the JV team at Franklin Central, and fell in love with it. Loved it. Loved being able to help kids. When you see kids grow and get better, and you were a part of that, that's something special. And then the next year I was a freshman coach. The next year I was a JV coach. Next year varsity assistant, and then was lucky enough at the age of 25, 26 to get hired as a head coach in Marion County. So it sometimes basketball can take you some crazy places.
Oh
So,
yeah.
like with you, I'm super excited to see where your career goes with, now you're up at the college ranks. So, it's going to be exciting to see.
I appreciate it. I tricked this idiot into giving me a job a few years ago, my first coaching job, and he let me volunteer. So yeah, I'm super appreciative, man. I've met some great people because of the game, and made some great relationships. So it's been good.
Um, Now we had a phone conversation about a week ago, and we talked about this idea of mindset.
Hmm.
And you brought up some really good questions, because you kind of went back to our high school days, and you were asking me about my mindset in high school, and I didn't even know how to answer the question. And the idea is mindset, somebody's mindset when it comes to like playing basketball,
Right.
is the mindset something that's already been dictated, maybe something they're born with, or something that comes natural to them, or is it something that can be improved? Is it like a skill? Is it something
Hmm.
that can get better over time? And I thought that was a great point, a great question, and I didn't even really know how to answer it because I never really internalized it and thought, why do I act this way? Do I take this mindset going into practice or going into a game? And we talked about having older siblings. I had a 3-year-old brother. Did that affect me? Wanting to
Right.
play against him and his friends. And if you aren't ready to compete with kids that are 2-3 years older, they're not going to let you play. And did
Right.
that change my mindset? Or, my dad getting me out when I was, in first and second grade and working on my jump shot, did that impact? I don't know. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think, now that we've kind of had a week to think about it, is
Right.
mindset natural, or is it something that's maybe affected and changed over time?
I'm of the belief it can be taught for sure, especially if the environment you're in is one that is like attempting to teach it. So the reason I called you is because I was putting together that PowerPoint I sent over to you for our guys, and like I said, I think it can be taught, but it has to be super intentional. So I was wondering, I started thinking about it, like in my career, the more focused athletes I play with, you were the number one, so I gave you a call. And then you told me like, yeah, I had an older brother, and I was like, well, I got an older brother. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
we kind of went through the same thing, but I had an average mindset. I had the average, I think, high school player mindset. Like I love showing up to the gym, playing around in the locker room, and semi serious on the court when it was time to get serious. So yeah, man, it's something that I'm wrestling with, and there's a lot of people much smarter than me I try to learn from. Urban Meyer has some good points on it that I've been reading, and Tim Kite.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. If you haven't read his book, he's got a great book. It's
above the line
Urban
is
Above the Line. Yeah. And
yep,
I read that, and that was one of the things that I read early in my, high school coaching career when I became a head coach. Was this idea of like, how do you separate yourself? And he
yep,
really had a good principle. I think it's called the 10-80-10 principle.
yeah, yep,
And it's that idea that 10% of people are just naturally great. They're just, doesn't matter who their coach is, doesn't matter where they're at, they're just going to be great. They're going to be
Tim,
at practice,
yep,
they're going to be going all out, doesn't matter. And
right,
then you got the bottom 10% are just always going to be lazy. They're always going to be people that fail. They're always going to be people that don't care. And nothing's going to change that. Doesn't matter who the coach is, doesn't matter where they're at.
right,
They're the bottom 10%. And then,
coasters,
most people fall in that 80%.
right,
So it's the idea of how do you get those people from the top 10% to lift and get people out of that 80% into the top 10%. And I just thought that was a great concept, because he would do things like, he would make, okay, if there's a guy like a 10%er, and he would always be in the weight room, and he would be by himself, and he would be getting better. Urban Meyer would say, you're not allowed to come in here unless you bring somebody
bring
with you.
somebody with you. Yeah,
And I thought that was a great concept of like really bringing up your teammates and bringing guys that might, sit at home and play Fortnite, saying, no, you got to come lift with me, or I can't lift.
right.
So that's Tim Kite, and that E plus R equals O.
Oh man,
Those whole concepts are really, really good. We've been obviously implementing that with our players. I think it's helped tremendously, because I think we got kids that are really bought in now. They're bought into that culture. They're bought into being good teammates and being there for their guys. So it's interesting. Now, you see a guy like Michael Jordan. We've talked about this with the whole what's the Last Dance.
yep,
And his mindset, and just, was he just naturally like that? But again, they talked about his family a lot. His dad was
right,
very demanding. He played, his older brothers. So there's got to be some kind of early family dynamic, I think, a little bit. But then you think of guys like LeBron James. LeBron
little,
James didn't have an older brother, or he didn't even have a father figure growing up. And he's just as, competitive and a standout. So I don't know. I just think that's such an interesting concept, but I think you're on the right path of, like, it's something that can be taught. It's something
yeah,
that really, if you focus on with your group and your culture, that mindset, it could really impact the group as a whole.
yeah. What's interesting about that 10-80-10 principle is both 10% are fighting for the 80 percenters.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So like even the bottom 10%, those guys are, they're trying to pull guys down. I
Oh yeah.
vividly remember guys coming up to me like, oh man, like I hate John, man. He thinks he's this and that. But in hindsight, like, no, John is a top 10%er. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah, it's like misery loves company. You know what I mean?
Right.
Those guys that
That,
are down at the bottom, they don't want to feel alone. They don't want to be the outcast or
right.
look different. So they try to bring those other guys down with them,
Right.
and it can become toxic. Like you said, I was being demanding as a player and saying like, no, we're going to work hard. You're going to have guys that conflict with that. You're going to have guys that go against that and say like,
Right.
this dude's just he's being a try hard. He's trying to be a coach's pet, whatever it might be. But they're just in that bottom 10%. So
Exactly. And that's the
interesting.
easy thing to do. That's the low hanging fruit, right? Is
Oh yeah.
to guys to get guys that might have had a bad day and say like, man, you gonna let them talk to you like that, or and it's super interesting as a coach, man, just to go through it and try to stay ahead of it on the other side.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's interesting now being on the coaching side. This is probably my 10th year as a coach, seeing the psychology on the other side.
Yeah.
When you were a player, it was easy to have your good days, have your bad days. As a coach, you can't allow that to happen. You're trying to
Right.
have a good day every day in practice, or game days. Every game is important. So
Mm.
yeah, it's interesting, that idea of mindset. I mean, I think there's a lot, sports psychology has grown. I think
Mm.
that's something that continues to be something that pro athletes, college teams continue to look at and try to grow because they see that it can benefit guys.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, let's let's get into that. Okay, in your mind, now that you've coached at the college level, and you're starting to recruit, you're starting to look at different guys. What separates a great player from a good player in your eyes?
You're not gonna like my answer, man. I was thinking about this the other day, and I honestly think the separator is just their mindset and their and their focus is going. I mean, I know we just talked about that for 5 minutes, but um, when you go out and get guys, especially like if you're a head coach and your livelihood is based on going out and getting 18-year-olds and bringing them in to do the right things. Um, at our level right now, we can't force you to get in the gym over the summer or postseason, right? So
Yeah.
we got to get guys that love to be in the gym, and they're just self motivated, and that all starts with their mindset. Now, obviously, everyone's not like that, but before you get to anything on the floor, what do they love to do? Do they love to be on Fortnite more than they love to be in the gym? Um, and it's pretty vivid. You come to know the guys that love to be in the gym. So I think that's probably the one of the biggest things that's the separator from the average to the elite guys, or it's just the mindset in there and how driven they are.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've battled with that idea of mindset and battling with kids of at the high school level it's even harder, I think, because if you're going to college to play, you at least already have a mindset, I guess. I mean, I'm sure there's kids that are just naturally talented, but I think to play at the college level, you have to have a certain mindset. You got there for a reason. Where at the high school, you might have a kid who's just playing just because his mom and dad told him to play, or it's just something to do, when he's not playing another sport. There's a lot of kids who might not have that mindset of like, I want to be great. I want to be a champion level player. And so you're constantly battling that. So I would agree with you. I mean, I think mindset's super important. Um, I think the ability to be humble, like check your ego, and
Oh yeah.
really, we talked about this before. The ability to audit yourself, I think, is a
Mhm.
key. Just not just in basketball, but in life. And this idea that like you have to be able to really look at yourself and really be honest about what you need to improve on, how good you really are,
Yeah.
because it's super easy to lie to yourself. It's super easy for your parents to lie to you.
Hmm.
And I think like really successful people like take an honest look at themselves and say, okay, this is what I got to improve on. This is what I'm not good at. This is what I am good at, and so those ideas of, you have to really be able to take an honest look at yourself and get better.
Yeah.
I think that's a key to not just basketball, but life.
I was It's funny, my wife and I, we just had that conversation yesterday. Just as we try to grow in our marriage and as people, it that's it's one of the hardest things just for people in general to do is to be honest with themselves. That's one of the best things about marriage is you have somebody there with you that kind of can notice when you're off track and
Yeah.
can be honest. But for you to be on your own and look at yourself in the mirror every day and tell yourself the 100% truth, I think is the hardest thing for people to do. But I agree with you.
All right, so we got a viewer question. I think this is a great question.
Oh
What are
boy,
some strategies you use to reset kids' expectations? So it's kind of that's a good question. Because you don't want to kill their confidence. You don't want to tell a kid and just totally shut down their dreams. There's a way to address their expectations. There's a way to address, what they need to improve on in, I don't want to say a nice way, but a realistic way. So I would say the way we do it, we use data a lot. If you want to play in college, here's the data. This isn't my data. This is, the NCAA, or this is, if you look at all the high school kids that are going to play D1, here's the data. Here's what they, maybe what they averaged or what their height, weight, athleticism is. Here's their GPA, and you can really use data to say, like, you have to be on this level if you want to go play at IU. Okay,
right.
if you're not on that level, you have to be at this level to play at a D2 school. If you're not on that level, you have to be at this level, And I try to tell guys, there's guys at D3 NAIA that are incredibly talented. They were all-state, Indiana All-Stars, guys that, like, were the best player in their area, and they didn't even get a sniff of D1. So you got to really explain to people and really be honest about their expectations, your expectations, and then what it really takes without killing their confidence.
Right. I agree with you. The game is obviously data driven now. So what we do is, especially in games, we have synergy. So synergy breaks down every single play and every single aspect you could even imagine. So we use that a lot, and like obviously, like you just said, like, hey man, the film doesn't lie. These stats don't lie. You turn the ball over out of traps. You got to get stronger, and we talk about how to do that. But yeah, we try to talk about at the D3 level what it looks like, and it's kind of like our expectation. It's not necessarily their expectation, right? This is what we all need to do to get better, including the coaches. So we talked about what the summer should look like for a champion. We talked about what it looks like for a challenger, which is kind of that middle tier, and what it looks like for a chump. So we use that at the end of the season just to kind of give guys a visual of where you want to be. Like if you don't want to be like, if you don't want to improve, then yeah, you're going to be more so on the chump side. It's funny how we call it chump, but if you want to be great and you want to be elite, and we talked about mindset earlier, it's going to take all those things to be closer to the challenge or the champion side. So that's one thing that we do along with the data, like you were saying.
Yeah, I think with the growth of film and data, it's been incredible for us because you can really show a kid, he might think he's playing hard. Okay, well, here's 5 plays we saw that we didn't feel you were going your hardest.
Right.
Or data. You think you're a good shooter, but you're shooting 27% from 3. That's not good. The expectation is to be above this level. So, and I like your idea of having that kind of tiered system of modeling it for him. This is what it looks like. This is what a champion looks like. This is what a guy kind of in the middle looks like, and this is what a chump looks like.
Right.
And we did something this year I thought really benefited us. We let the players set their own expectations. So we set it up where we said, what are your standards for yourself? What do you guys want to hold yourselves accountable to? Right. And they had to come up with their own list, and they came up with a really good list. Some of the stuff was normal, give good effort, but they came up with some good stuff. It was like be coachable from the coaches, but also be coachable from your teammates. Yeah. If your teammate is trying to coach you up and getting on you, you got to be able to take that. So for them to come up with those own ideas by themselves, I thought that was really powerful. And then it was something throughout the season we could go back to and say, hey, these aren't our standards.
Right.
These are your standards. You guys came up with this, and you're not living up to your own standards, so something's got to change. So I think doing something like that can sometimes help, but I like your idea of kind of modeling that and really explaining like this is what it looks like.
Right.
Because
I think.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I think what helps today's athlete as well is using guys that they know, not necessarily even guys like professional athletes. So we'll show like what it looks like for LeBron. After that he was, what was that, 2010 against the Mavs, right? And then the work he had to put in to get to that next year, and the scrutiny that he went through and things, and kind of just talk about the adversity that goes on through throughout the journey. So kind of modeling it with the challengers, the champions, and the chumps, and also showing them professional athletes is kind of what I've noticed that kind of clicks in their brain.
Especially with guys they like, because then that's something they can attribute to. Okay, I want to be like LeBron, or I want to be like Steph, whatever. It's something like, okay, this is what they do. This is why they're so great.
Right.
Okay, we got another viewer question. As coaches, do you guys still use a point system for effort? Like deflections, diving on the ground, things like that. Do you guys use a point system or track things like that?
Yeah, we didn't last year, but we're gonna have something called the Highlander Award next year, and we are gonna do those things. We'll be a lot more athletic and quicker next year, so we will track things like deflections. We'll track things like blow-bys, kind of like we had in high school. I thought that was pretty cool and ahead of its time. I would like to get a hold of that and see. We had WODs in high school.
Yeah. See, we still track WODs.
What does that stand for?
Whipped on defense. So the way I categorized it was I just changed it to one category. So Coach James, they had like this incredible spreadsheet that would track everything.
Right.
So we luckily have huddle assist, which is kind of like synergy or whatever you guys have, where we send in the film and they break down literally everything. They break down. It's incredible. So we have all the data, but what I do individually is I'll go back, and if you were responsible for a bucket, like your mistake or your bad defense,
right,
you get a WOD. So shot goes up, you don't block out, your man gets a tip in, that's a WOD. You got whipped on defense. Or the guy, even if it's like,
do they track that for you?
They don't. I can add that in online, which is cool. So it'd be something like, even if it's like a second tier play. So like a second tier play to me is you got beat, that your help defender had to slide over. He kicks it to that guy and he hits a three.
Right.
The normal fan would look at that and go, why isn't he guarding his guy? With us as coaches, we notice, okay, it's because the guy on the ball got beat first. He had to slide over. So we would give the guy on the ball a WOD because you were responsible, for the score.
Right.
But that was a great question.
What about I don't just a little nerd talk here, just kind of trying to think. What about, so that guy helps and he kicks, let's say he's driving baseline, the guy stops it outside the paint, baseline drive, and he kicks it to the corner. Is there a WOD for the top guy that didn't drop?
Yeah. Yeah, we would. I mean, we just basically break it down as a mistake. If you weren't in the rotation correctly, if you weren't where you were supposed to be, we'll give you a WOD. So that would be a negative towards your overall, plus minus, total score.
What do you guys use it? Like, what do you do with like if I'm leading in the point total? Is there anything that you do with that, or do you think?
We talk about it a lot. We don't have an award for it, but we really, really promote it and talk about it. And we'll say like, hey, this kid, he's at plus 200. You're at plus 100.
Right.
So he's twice as valuable as you on the floor. And it really gives us, you know what I mean, in terms of playing time and comparing players and those type of things, it really does help us as coaches because we can look at two kids and go, holy cow, he's plus, 150, this kid's 50. So when he's on the floor, more positive things are happening. So, we don't go crazy with the data. I think there isn't the eyeball test where you're just looking and go, okay, this kid's better, or this kid really helps us, or this, whatever it might be. But data really, really has helped. I mean, the NBA teams are getting crazy with the data.
Yeah.
Like the Rockets are kind of at the forefront of some of their guys are telling them they should shoot a three every play.
Yeah.
Some of their like data analysis guys.
I was watching the All-Star game this past. I rewatched the fourth quarter today, and they had the Kobe rule. In the fourth quarter, he just had it the first. So yeah, the Rockets needed 2 points, I think, and James Harden had a layup, and instead of taking the layup, he kicked it to an open three just for somebody else. Like he could have just won the game, but it's just like a part of his DNA. Like he can't take that. We need that corner three.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, and I think a lot of people have talked about how the NBA's changed. I mean, if you go back and you watch the 80s and the 90s, it's so compact, and there's like four guys right by the lane, and your three and four were more like big, burly, post player guys. And nowadays, your four better be able to shoot some threes, or you're not going to be and handle it, or you're not even going to be on the floor.
Right.
And your three, I mean, oh my gosh, your three, a lot of times it's just 3 and D. You got to be able to shoot threes and defend. Right. So it's interesting how the game's changed. I think a lot of that has to do with the next guy I want to talk about, Steph Curry.
Okay.
So, you're a self-proclaimed Steph Curry hater. For some reason, I still can't comprehend it in my brain. So what's your main argument? What do you have against Steph Curry?
So I think it started with just you telling me. I think you said this years ago. You told me he was the best point guard ever, right?
He is.
Okay. So you told me that, and I just don't feel like I can't put him in the tier, which a lot of people did with like the LeBrons and the Kawhis and things like that. So I think he is as great as you think he is, but you just think I just think you overrate him a little bit, because I can't remember. I don't think he's had the impact as far as winning on his own, right? So before KD got there, they got a chip, right? They got a chip. He didn't get the Finals MVP, whether you like it or not. It was up for debate. He didn't get it. So I just don't think, and I can't remember moments that he had where he just had big playoff moments. I try to think about it like an hour before we talked, and like I don't remember any moments. Like LeBron had moments in Boston, and he had the Pistons, right? And Kawhi had the shot against Philly. Like I just don't remember moments. And then so I looked at this like right before we got on, and I'm like, what is he like? Has he ever hit a big shot in his career? Other than the one at
they've been up 10. They don't
have to. He's never been in position. No, he's been in position. So I looked this up before we got on, and he's for go-ahead shots under 20 seconds. He's 0 for 8. He's the best shooter ever now. He's 0 for 8 for go-ahead buckets. And I don't know. I just don't think he's made that impact. But he has the next 4 years. No KD. He has those 2 All-Stars beside him, and so we'll see what they do. If he gets a Finals MVP, even if he gets that team to the Finals, I think that says a lot.
Okay. There's a lot to break down there.
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, before KD got there, they broke the single season record for most wins.
All right.
And he had it go back and look at his stats from that year. He's one of a few guys that it was like he shot 40% from 3, 50% from the floor.
He was amazing that regular season.
Yeah, that was one of the best regular seasons of all time.
Absolutely.
Back-to-back MVPs.
Let's stop there. What happened in the finals? If this team was that good, he's the best player.
No, here's what I'll say. He ran into the greatest player of all time. That's what happened when they got up 3-1, and actually the NBA rigged this, in my opinion.
Oh my God, here we go.
Because the Warriors were up 3-1. Yep. Draymond gets kicked out of game 5. So obviously they win. It goes back to Cleveland. They win. It goes to game 7. And really those 3 games, LeBron probably put together the greatest performances I've ever seen. I mean, I don't know how someone watches that and doesn't say this is the greatest player that's ever played, because that was unbelievable.
So I went back and I watched that fourth quarter today just because I knew we were going to talk about it. And it was a low-scoring game. I don't know if you remember. It was 80-80 with 4 minutes to go.
Both teams were pretty nervous and played pretty poorly.
Yeah, I mean, I think LeBron had a triple double, but I mean, I don't know. He had a big turnover down the stretch, and I don't know. I just don't remember like he just doesn't have those moments that I feel like the that top tier has that you put him in. So until he gets that, I just don't have him there.
Okay. That's fair. I mean, I think you're wrong, but it's fair. Okay, we got another question. Has the NBA 3-point, has that trickled down to college and high school? I'll kind of let you answer that first, and then I'll talk about it from the high school perspective. Have you seen it in college?
Yeah, I think it depends on just the philosophy of the coach. But yeah, I think you're absolutely seeing more teams where they love the layup and like the three is the saying, right? That the kind of the basketball is taking on. So not seeing as many teams throwing in the post, I guess is what they're probably referring to. But we play against a 6'8" kid, and he's in our league, and they definitely throw it down there to him. But it's definitely a lot of ball screens. I think that comes from the
Yeah.
NBA. So that's probably the biggest thing, the ball screen. We see a lot of those, even especially at the high school level too. At the high school level more so than at the college level. I thought we saw a lot of teams just kind of try to get layups or try to get threes. There was nothing in between. But at the college level, I think there's more ball screen stuff.
Yeah, I haven't noticed a huge change. I mean, I'm sure there's teams or there's players that want to shoot from the outside more just because that's what they see on TV. But I mean, from a coaching standpoint, I don't know if there's a ton of guys that are really, really promoting like you have to shoot this amount of threes or whatever.
Right.
I think a lot of high school coaches are still, let's get the best shot. What if it's a layup or a three, we'll take it. Well, at Decatur, we always talk about getting layups and free throws. Like that's what we're trying to get, and then we'll get open threes off of that. Because if you're getting open layups, obviously the defense collapses, then you can start to kick it out. But we don't really go into games thinking we have to shoot a bunch of threes. That's just not something we like talk about or promote. If it happens, it happens. But yeah, I
know a few coaches when I was coaching in Phoenix, like that's their philosophy. They talk about it. They want to get up, 30 plus threes. But in our league, there's only one team that I think does that and has that philosophy.
All right, let's go to another player argument. There's been a lot of talk with MJ in this whole Last Dance. So who's your GOAT and why?
All right. With this conversation, man, I thought about this when all that was going on. When I was watching The Last Dance, I couldn't even watch it with an objective eye because all I could hear or see on Twitter was kind of the fans and how they talk down on LeBron. But as far as the game of basketball goes, LeBron is the greatest player that I've seen, and I went back and watched Mike. Like we've talked about, we went back and watched some 80s games, 90s games. But I just think LeBron can get you the 30 that Mike can get you at an efficient rate, right? And but he's a point guard who can pass it, probably one of the best passers ever to play the game, and he's bigger and faster and stronger. So when you break all those things down, I'm judging it from watching the game, where I think a lot of people judge it. They say like sixth graders in three, So for me, I think playing the game, I will take LeBron, but obviously he's never gonna win over those guys that think no one will ever be better,
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think The Last Dance has really kind of solidified people's opinions where they just refuse to believe that someone can be better than Michael. They've refused to believe that LeBron can be better.
Right.
The rings argument, I don't like the rings argument because number one, Bill Russell and there's other guys that have more rings than MJ. Right. So you can't use that as an argument because Bill Russell's got 10 or 11 rings. You know what I mean? And then on the flip side of that, I mean, we kind of did you see Doc Rivers' interview?
I didn't see it. I saw a little.
Man, he had such a good quote about LeBron and Mike. And he said that MJ came into the league. He didn't have these crazy huge expectations. Like people knew he was good, but they didn't think he was going to be Michael Jordan.
Right.
And he didn't have the scrutiny and the criticism early in those first 7 years. You know, of, hey, you haven't won a championship. Hey, you know, you keep failing. Where LeBron had these super, super huge expectations coming in as out of high school. So he was a 19-year-old kid, and he was, you know, given all these expectations. You have to be the greatest. You have to live up to Kobe. You have to live up to MJ. And he has, in my opinion, almost surpassed some of those expectations.
Yep.
And I think Doc Rivers, I mean, he says it really well, but he talks about how LeBron, as a 19-year-old, was under so much scrutiny and criticism if he failed, if he didn't succeed. So kind of an interesting take that I didn't really think about. So in my opinion, again, I get a lot of flack for saying this. My coaching staff, we always argue about this because I say LeBron James is the greatest player to ever play.
It's like you're not allowed to say that. Like, you know?
Yeah, and like people don't even want to have that conversation. And you know, I try to break it down as like, no, let's look at the stats. Let's look at the you know, the things that he's done. LeBron's a created player. Like if you went into a lab and you created a basketball player, LeBron would be who, you know, you might make him a better shooter. You might make him a you know, a lights out shooter, but LeBron embodies like everything you would want as a basketball player. He can guard 5 positions. He's a great passer. Can score any way he wants to score. You know, he makes his teammates better. You can go through category after category. And it's like, I don't, people just refuse to accept it, or just in their minds, it's just no one can reach Mike. And so in their eyes, no one's going to.
Right. So I've had to tell myself, like, if they have that mindset, it's kind of like you got to figure it out early. Because I like talking about this stuff. I like people telling me why LeBron's not as good, and you know, and them questioning me when I tell them why he's better. But if they have that mindset that no one will ever be better, that's why I say like we act like Jordan's God, because no one will ever be better than him. It's a laughable statement.
Yeah, and it's like saying people in the future aren't going to be better than LeBron or KD or guys that play now. Like, of course, there's going to be guys that come along that are better or have a better career.
Right. When Kevin Durant Jr. comes in the league and he's dunking from, you know, the 3-point line, like, I can look at that and say, oh, man, LeBron couldn't do that.
And one of my all-time, like, bad takes that people get on me about is I just think we're at a golden age of basketball. Like, if you go back and you watch full games from the 80s, it's terrible.
Right.
The basketball is almost unwatchable. Like, people talk about Magic Johnson and, you know, these guys that played in the 80s, and, you know, you got to respect those guys because they saved the NBA. They were incredible legends. But they they would struggle in today's NBA. And
you're not allowed to say that.
Yeah, you're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to say like guys are better now. And it's true. It's so true. I mean, go watch the games. Go watch a full game of the 1985 NBA championship. Now, you got guys that are very skilled. Like Kevin McHale is unbelievable. If you go watch him, like the big guys are way more skilled back then than they are today in terms of around the basket. But the guards and the athleticism and the length. I mean, like Dominique Wilkins was like an NBA great. And it's like every team in the NBA has a guy like Dominique Wilkins. They have a 6'7" guy with a 40-inch vertical. Every single team. And it's like those guys are just average. They're like, you know what I mean? So, you know, those are arguments people won't listen to or refuse to have.
I think you gotta challenge some of those older guys, you know, your uncles and your dad. Just challenge them to, like, let's go back and watch the same game, you know? And sit with them, and you know, and I did that with my dad this past month during quarantine. We were able to do that, and he called me back the next day, like, man, you'll never hear me Like you'll never hear me. Like he's like, man, I went back and watched Magic, man. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
He was
because
like,
you
he
have
couldn't
these
imagine
ideas
Westbrook.
in your head. Yeah, Westbrook. Like, I mean, I don't want to get into the time machine argument because you can run circles around that, and
Right.
people say like, well, if Magic had the diets of today and the training of today, he would be, people just like move the goalpost. But the guard, like, we live in a golden age of guard play and wing play. I mean,
Yep.
these guys like are so unbelievably skilled and athletic, and I mean, a guy like Paul George and Kevin Durant
Mm-hmm.
are unicorns. I mean, they would. And what frustrates me, okay, is because like I think most people, will say, okay, Magic's he's a legend, Larry's a legend, but what I get frustrated at is when people almost like disrespect today's players, and they're like Michael Wilbon said, LeBron and KD could not play in the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah, man.
And
He's getting paid to say that too.
And I couldn't believe it. It really felt like a take that was just set up to cause drama and get clicks, because you can't believe that. You can't believe that LeBron, 6'9", 260, freight train, isn't going to be able to handle the physicality of Danny Ainge and Bill Laimbeer. Like,
I think
I mean,
the funny thing about that argument is it's like the only players that could adapt are the older players. So like if we talk about how 3-point shooting, for instance, like they could adapt to today's game. They would shoot more threes, they practice more. But when they flip it and we say, like, can LeBron play in the 80s? They say, oh no, he's too soft. So there's no adaptability for LeBron.
Well, here was a rule that I learned about. I didn't even know about this rule until I was actually watching Detail. Have you watched that show? It used to be Kobe, R.I.P.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about on ESPN.
Well, Steve Kerr did an episode where he broke down the Jazz and the Bulls finals.
Yeah.
And they used to have a rule. I didn't know this. It's called a legal defense, where guys could not. You basically couldn't double team or play help side. So if your offensive player was above the free throw line, you couldn't drop below the free throw line.
Really?
So he talks about how like MJ and Karl Malone, they would just go stick them on the block, and they would send the three other guys, and they would just go run to almost like half court.
I've seen them do that. Like,
and they couldn't help. So it was basically one-on-one. I'm like, okay, so you're going to do that with Kevin Durant, LeBron, and they're not going to be dominant? So I don't know. I mean, you can run circles around this argument, but I just get frustrated when people like Paul Pierce had a top 5 list and said that LeBron wasn't a top 5 player. You're just going, like, these guys get paid to say this stuff. And it's frustrating because
I enjoy it, man. It's and LeBron, man, he gets so much hate for whatever. And I used to hate him like once we got done with high school and early days on to college, like I was a big Kobe guy. But the run he's been on this decade, like it's just you just can't deny it, man.
If you watch basketball and understand it, just go. I challenge anybody who watches this, go, if you have in your mind that LeBron's not the best player ever, or Magic's better, or Larry's better, that's fine. That's a fine opinion. But go watch the games. Like, literally go to YouTube and type in any playoff series. You'll find a game. And go watch those games and tell me that they're better than LeBron. And if you can convince me, then I'll listen, but you're not going to say that.
Yeah, I love to hear people say that stuff out loud, because you cannot watch Magic play, and all respect to those guys, but you're not going to watch him play and then go watch LeBron play and formulate truthfully and objectively in your mind that he's better than, LeBron. So, but
yeah, and watch the full game. Mm-hmm. Don't watch the highlights, because there was a highlight going around Twitter, and it keeps going around of like how the 80s and the 90s is so physical, and it's like 20 years of fouls
right.
into
Punches after
into a
free throw.
little like 4 minute highlight. And so people, in their minds are like, oh my God, the 80s and the 90s was so physical. You couldn't even go through the lane without a guy taking your head off. And you go back and you watch the full game and you're like, this isn't even more physical than today's game. Like there's some hard fouls, but this isn't like crazy physical like everybody makes it out to be. And I think
Right.
people have these like nostalgic ideas in their head that it used to be so much better and it was so much, tougher and all this stuff, and it really wasn't.
Yeah, I used to say that. I mean, because my dad told me that as I was growing up, like, "Oh, I was so physical in the '80s. You couldn't get in the paint without them knocking you on your tail." And so I used to say that, and then once I went back and started watching, like one day, I kind of like was charting when MJ was was driving and like how many hard fouls there were in the Pistons series, and it was like something like I think the most he got hit the ground was like 3 times in a game. Every other time was like once a game, which is normal.
And wasn't
Um,
there like a funny like thing that went around as the Jordan, you couldn't touch Michael Jordan, or he
yeah,
would, he got all the foul calls. That was like the
right.
whole like
Oh
funny
yeah, they did.
joke back then was like you couldn't touch Jordan.
Right.
Because didn't Magic even said that? Remember when they were doing like the pictures for
Mhm.
they were doing the pictures for the
Oh yeah,
USA
yeah,
Dream
for the
Team, and
USA team.
Magic said something. He was like, "I don't want to stand too close to Michael. They'll call a foul."
Right,
So it's
right.
like, obviously, you know what I mean. I don't know. I just get frustrated with that argument because I don't think the game was like that much more physical. I think that's just a
Right.
myth that people have in their minds because there's hard fouls that they've seen on a highlight.
Yep. 3 minute highlight.
All right, I'm gonna leave this up. We're almost finished. We'll leave it up to a couple guest questions. So if you have any
No.
guest questions, here's your last chance. Type into Periscope. Man, we're live on Periscope, Facebook,
Nice.
YouTube, Twitch. I got it all going.
Nice, man. I've been tuning into some of these. They're great, man, especially during quarantine. We're stuck in the house, and it
Yeah,
was good to get one of my good friends, JJ, on last week, and Andrew Warren, and so yeah, it's been
it's
entertaining,
been
man.
fun, man. It's been fun to talk to guys and hear different perspectives and, get just different people on. And like you said, during quarantine, and we're not doing anything anyway. And it's been fun for me. It's been fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been hard to set up, and obviously I've had audio issues and things like that, but no, it's been a lot of fun. My wife Raven is like, we're doing one.
Oh,
So
see you next week.
yeah, we're gonna do one. I'm a little nervous to put her in front of a camera on a live stream because
I'm
she
tuning into that one.
she has a tendency to try to embarrass me and say funny stuff. So I
Uh,
might, I might have to put a 20-second delay on that one. So if
yeah.
the broadcast just gets cut off, just know she said something crazy and that I couldn't put that on live television.
Shout out to Raven, man. She's my editor for my final paper.
Yeah, how's the paper?
I mean, everything's done. I'm all done with school now. For until if I decide to go back. But yeah, shout out to her. I appreciate
Yeah, she loves doing that stuff. She loves correcting men.
it.
She
Yeah, Justine,
she
my
would be
wife.
she'd be a perfect editor.
Yeah, my wife jumped in. Like I had like an hour conversation with Reagan over my paper, and then the next week Justine's trying to help me so she can correct me. She was pretty good at it too.
Yeah, that goes back to our being self-aware and
Yeah,
honest with each other in a marriage. I just ask her, and she tells tells me
right.
what I need to hear. Um, yeah, I mean, there's questions about like who's your top point guards of all time. Who's your top? I mean, I'll start because I'm
Well, before you go, let me ask a question
okay.
because I think there's guys that play the position that I wouldn't consider like a top point guard. You know what I
Like
mean?
who's that?
Like Dame Lillard is a great player, but I don't he brings the ball up the floor. But the term
He's
point
not.
guard,
Yeah,
it kind of means something, or it always has. So, are we talking just the position? I guess I'm kind of asking you. Are we talking just the position, or are we talking the the actual
Like
dynamic of being a point guard? You know,
that's a good point. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Let's say the actual dynamic of being
okay,
a point guard, like being a guy, like because I would argue the same with you. Like Lillard's, he's more of like a scorer. He's more of
right,
like he brings the ball up the floor, but he's not. He's not like the prototypical point guard. So I
right.
would say no. Let's go like prototypical point guard.
All right. You say you're going first?
Yeah, I'll go first because
All right.
my opinions are correct. Um, I would go Steph as number one. In my opinion, he's the most skilled player of all time. He doesn't rely on athleticism. He doesn't rely on his size. He's just skilled. He's the most skilled player of all time. So he would be my number one. Um, Number two, I mean, I like Steve Nash
He's
in
on my list.
terms of what he was able to do and playing for the Suns and what they were able to do during those years. He's probably the best player, the best point guard to. You could throw John Stockton in there, but the best point guard to never win a championship
Mhm.
with at the level he was at. Um,
Got Chris Paul.
I love Chris. I mean, I hate to say like modern guys, but I think Chris Paul, after watching, I'm weird. I go back and watch like old games all the time. I mean, it's probably
Hmm.
because of quarantine, but I went back and watched the Olympic Games,
Yeah,
2008 and 2012.
yeah,
I forgot how good he was like
yeah.
during those years. I mean, he was incredible during those times. So he would be probably in my top five. I mean, I haven't seen Isaiah and John Stockton play enough to
I
have
think
an
Isaiah's
opinion.
kind of in that Dame Lillard category as far as
Yeah.
running the point. But
Um, but just like John Stockton's stats, like I didn't realize he's the all-time leader in steals by like a lot. Like
yeah,
no one's gonna catch him.
just
Um, so that was kind of crazy to me. My all-time like opinion that everyone hates is that I don't think Magic Johnson was that good. Like when I go back and watch, I mean, yeah, he's got some highlights, he's got some cool like no look passes, but as a player, I mean, he couldn't shoot. He wasn't a great defender. He was unathletic. I just have some I don't know. I think everybody kind of hypes him up. He's a little overrated to me.
yeah. I think so much of the conversation when it comes to Magic and even Steph to some, I think the where you land, like you got to be in the right situation and the stars kind of got to align. So when Magic came in, like he came into a pretty good team, and then obviously Kareem and Worthy and those guys. Um, so he had it pretty good, and the situation was great for him. But yeah, you go back and watch, and you try to, like we were talking about earlier, just imagine it's hard. Like you're not allowed to say this, but there's a lot of point guards in the league that are like better than Magic Johnson, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but you're not really supposed to say that. But yeah, a lot of guys you named, Steve Nash is man. I love going back and watching him in the pick and roll. He's my favorite player to just watch him break down and watch his change of pace and the pick and roll. Chris Paul is on that list for me. I think he might be actually, if we're just talking playing the position, being
Yeah.
able to score at a high rate and get guys involved and a great passer, great defender on ball. I think he would probably be my top. But obviously
Yeah.
he doesn't have the championship pedigree.
C.
As
Rob
some
said Allen Iverson.
no AI, he was a killer, but he wasn't. I wouldn't put him in this.
Yeah,
Shout out to
he's kind of like a Dame Lillard to me. Like
yeah,
he's like a point scorer.
yeah,
He wasn't really the guy like you want to be the distributor or like running the offense. I mean, your offense runs through him, but it's to score.
right.
So it's hard to put him in that category. But that was a good question. I mean, I think we're in a golden age of point guards. Like you look at the guys we have in the league now. Some of the best players of all time. Kyrie could
Oh
be
man.
thrown in there. Like you said, I mean, it depends on what you view as like a point guard.
Hmm. I think
Um,
it's changing. It's changing. I mean, with Westbrook and D Rose, Kyrie, Dame Lillard, like those guys are not your prototypical point guard. Even Steph to some degree, like they played him off the ball a ton.
yeah,
and he's really good at it. So the game's just changed so much.
Yeah. Most underrated players right now. Or
Underrated.
doesn't even have to be now. I guess it could be past players too. Most underrated.
I don't think Jason Tatum gets enough love. I think he's kind of next up. I don't think, and we'll see what happens in the playoffs. Hopefully, if the
Yeah.
NBA comes back.
Yeah, I was
Maybe,
surprised when I watched him in college at Duke. I could not believe that he wasn't going to be the first overall pick.
yeah,
Because who went in front of him? Fultz and Ball? Was it Fultz
Lonzo.
and Lonzo? I couldn't
Yeah,
believe it because I watched him one game, and he had the most NBA ready game. I mean, he
yeah,
was just like hitting fadeaways and just he could score in so many ways. He's long. Like I could
mhm.
not believe that he went third. That like whoever drafted in front of him should be fired if they're not already gone.
Yeah. That I think he's very overrated. And then another guy is, and like we were talking about, where you land matters. And Bradley Beal is just in a bad situation, but he can really go. He can shoot it well. He can defend, so he can play both ends, and he can score with the ball in his hands. He can play well off the ball. So he's going to get up out of there, I'm sure, pretty soon, and that'll be fun to watch.
I've heard so many trades involving him. One was to the Pacers, which I was like, I would love that, but I don't think the Pacers will do that. The other one was he just went on a podcast and said that they almost did a Harden deal where Harden almost got sent. This was back like on his draft night
Oh yeah,
where he almost got sent to Oklahoma City and Harden was going to go to the Wizards.
mm,
Because I think it was Harden's like rookie year, maybe second year.
hmm
But that would have been crazy. Because Beal, I agree with you. I think he's unbelievable, especially with the absence of
John Wall.
John Wall been hurt, up and down. It's been crazy. But yeah, Bradley Beal.
I got one more.
Okay, go ahead.
Fred VanVleet.
See, I was the biggest Van Fleet hater until the playoffs.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then he had an unbelievable playoffs, and then this past year, like this, half a year, he's been playing great. So I would agree, he's pretty underrated. He's pretty, up there in terms of helping your team win games.
hmm
Hold on, real quick. Sorry, my wife's yelling at me. No, that was a
I
great
love.
question.
I love that question. I keep going if.
Yeah, I mean, a couple players in my eyes underrated. I think Sabonis from the Pacers is one
I
of.
haven't seen him too much.
See, we had season tickets, not this year but last year, so I got to see him a lot, and he is so unbelievable. Like in terms
Yeah,
of rebounding and defending and like finishing around the basket and just being like a playmaker.
yeah,
Like when they were talking about trading him, I was so upset. I was like, I will never watch a Pacers game if they trade him because he's been like the backbone, especially when Oladipo got hurt.
yeah. That
So
trade worked out for them.
yeah, oh my gosh, he is so underrated. Yeah, I kind of agree with some of these comments. Jokic, he gets pub, but like not like he really should.
Right.
Because he's 7 foot. I remember, I want to say it was like my brother's bachelor party or something. We went and so this was early in Jokic's career. So this was
Yeah.
like 4 or 5 years ago when he was an unknown guy, and he tore up the Pacers. Oh my God, he went for a triple double. He was throwing all these crazy passes, and we were in the stands just going, "Who is this guy?" We couldn't even pronounce his name, but
Yeah.
lo and behold, now everybody knows him. So he might not be underrated, but I think he kind of goes under the radar in terms of being one of the top NBA players.
Yeah. Yeah. I really haven't watched him too much. I think what was it, last year in the playoffs? I saw him a little bit. Um, but I have heard that how great he is, and obviously he's an all-star and things. My last one, and everyone hates him, and I get it, is Draymond Green.
I mean,
Able to
I would agree
exceed.
with you. Um, People hate him for his personality and his antics, but in terms of being a player that's going to help your franchise and help your team win games,
Yeah,
he's up there with anybody in terms of
right.
defending, rebounding. I mean,
Recruiting.
well, yeah. I mean, hey, in the NBA, it's part of the game now. So,
Oh, for sure.
but it's there's a lot of guys that go underrated, and um, I had okay. Have you watched who's the youngest Ball brother?
LaMelo.
LaMelo. Have you watched him play like very much?
I saw him when he had like 90 some points in high school.
So I had this debate with my buddies. I think he's going to be the number one overall pick
Hmm.
and have a good NBA career.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is I think his game is the most prepared to be a good point guard in the NBA. He's
Hmm.
going to be a guy that can come off ball screens. He's going to be incredibly talented in the NBA. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I haven't seen it too much, but I've heard that, and I'm excited to see where it goes. Obviously, Bonzo's had a little. He's been struggling a little bit. Actually, he's picked it up a little bit as of late. But yeah, I'm glad that the dads kind of calmed down a little bit and kind of let the guys, be who they are.
Yeah, he was pretty ridiculous there for a while. So,
Yeah.
all right, I think we're gonna end it here. So again, appreciate everybody that tuned in. If you're watching this on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment. What did you disagree with us? If you're watching on Periscope, continue to tune in. And again, yeah, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you taking time out of your evening. Kendall, thanks for joining us, man. Wish you nothing but success, man. Keep getting better, keep improving your team, and can't wait to see you guys play this next year.
For sure, for sure. Thanks for all your help, man, and recruiting Seti Brent.
Yeah, excited. For those of you who don't know, I have a player who's a senior this year who's he's going out. He just recently committed to Houghton, so really excited to see him go there and play, and I think he's going to be in good hands. Going to be in good
Yeah,
hands out there. So super exciting to see that, man. But again, thanks for joining us. And again, everybody that tuned in, appreciate you guys.
yeah. Thanks for having me, man.